Okay. 86a, the Mishnah. Anything that comes off the altar, meaning it's getting burnt on the altar and it comes off the altar, lo yakser, you don't have to return it. Also, if a coal comes off the altar, you don't have to return it. So a varim shepakom mizbeach kodem chatzos yakser. You have limbs that are being burnt on the altar, so before chatzos, so you got to put it back. There's a mitzvah to burn until chatzos. Umolin bahan, there's me'ilah. But li'achar chatzos, once chatzos already passed, so then lo yakser, there's no mitzvah to put it back on. Ve'ein molin bahan. So before chatzos, you put it back on, and there is me'ilah. After chatzos, you don't put it back on, and there's no me'ilah, and we'll see more about this. They're already called consumed. Once chatzos hits, they're called consumed. Once they're consumed, there's no mitzvah to put it back on. Just like the altar itself sanctifies that which is fitting for it, so too the ramp. Sorry. So to the ramp sanctifies. Just like the altar and the ramp sanctify that which is fitting for them, so to the sanctified vessels. The vessels also give sanctity to the things that are fitting for them. Okay. So now, what case is our Mishnah talking about that it came off the altar? Hechidam. If you're talking about something which has substance to it, so it still has to be burned. And if it has no substance to it, so that even before chatzos, there's no need to put it back on. So hechidam, eat is mamish if you lock chatzos nami. Either less bu mamish if you call chatzos nami lo. What are we talking about? There's a mitzvah to put it back on, or don't put it back on. As long as the piece of meat has substance to it, so keep burning it. And if it doesn't, it's totally consumed, it's hard as a rock, so then don't put it back on. So lo tzricha b'shriri. We're talking about a case where something's just very hard. The fire hardened it a lot, but it didn't become a coal yet. So it's more like dry wood. So such a case it's not a coal. It hasn't got down to just regular coal, and therefore you should put it back on. If it got to a coal status, so then it for sure should not be put back on. But if it's a case where the altar definitely burnt it to a certain degree, not fully consumed it, so that's the case where before chatzos put it back on, after chatzos, no need. How do you know that chatzos is the determining factor when something is considered consumed or not? One pasuk says you burn the whole night, and one pasuk says you should go take off, and then scoop out the ashes and put it for the trumas hadeshin, for the removal of the ashes. So, which one is it? Do you let it burn the whole night, or do you have to remove the ashes? So. So says the Gemara like this: Chelkeu, chetziv lehaktara, v'chetziv leharama. Because of these two verses, one implies just keep it burning, and one implies no, you have to remove some of it and put it away for the special trumas hadeshin to be scooped up the next morning. So what do? So half of the nighttime, is fit for consumption, and half the nighttime is fit for harama, removal. So chatzos is that middle point. Before chatzos, keep burning it. After chatzos, it's now considered consumed already, and therefore, if it comes off the altar, you don't need to put it back on. Yeah. Rashi points out that if the thing actually has meat on it, so then we don't say you remove it, that you remove it for the Trumas Hadeshin. It has to be that's already consumed. So we're talking about things that are already hard, like our case, already very hard. They're considered consumed already at midnight. If it actually has meat on it still, so then of course you would leave it back on. Masir Rav Kahana says B'chol Yom Torah Mesam Mizbeach Mikoras Hagever. Every day they would remove the ashes with the calling of the rooster. O Samuchlo, or right next to it. O Me'achoro, or right after it. B'Yom Kippurim, on Yom Kippur, they would do it from Chatzos. They would remove the ashes. Viraglayim, the Viragalim, on the holidays they would do a Bashmoros Harishona from the first watching of the night, meaning even before Chatzos, because we'll see of the abundance of people that came for the 3 holidays. So now, the East Sakadaitach Mechatzos de Araisa, so Heichi Makdimina. If this idea that only once Chatzos hits is something fit for consumption, it's considered consumed, and that is the status of the ashes, that you'd have to remove it. So if that's the Araisa, how are they ever able to remove it any earlier? And it sounds like they were able to do it earlier, especially on the holidays where you had so many people. So Heichi Makdimina. Amar Rav Yochanan Mimash Shenamar Kol Adei Sha'ad Boker Matam Alomer Ad Boker Tein Boker LeBoker Shalayla. So since it says Kol Laila, you don't know that it's until the morning. Of course you do. So then why does it say it should burn the whole night Ad HaBoker until the morning? Obviously, once the morning comes, then the night is gone. So why did it say Ad Boker? To teach you Tein Boker LeBoker Shalayla. You should put another morning to the morning of the night. Meaning you can add on time to the morning, so to speak. You can preempt the morning and have earlier times to do the Trumas Hadeshin. So Hilkach, therefore, Kol Yoma Mikaros Hagever. Every day, as soon as a rooster crowed, so then you can remove the ashes. Sagi. Yom Kippurim Mishum Choshesh Kohen Gadol Mechatzos. On Yom Kippur, because we're worried about the Kohen Gadol getting too weak, so he could do it from Chatzos. And Uberagalim, Tinefishi Karbanos, we have so many Karbanos on the holidays. The Kadmi, that you can do even earlier. Because Asi Yisrael Mashmos Harishona. There you can even do it from the first watching of the night. As it says, before the rooster would already crow, you had the Azara, the courier was filled with Jews, and then they would pack in. So then you could do it even earlier. So this pasuk teaches you that you can preempt the Trumas Hadeshin depending on the circumstances. So simply understood from the morning when the rooster crows, the first thing they did in the morning was take out the ashes from the previous night. But Tein Boker, the Boker teaches you that you can even preempt it. So on Yom Kippur they had their reasons, and on Yom Tov they had their reasons. So fine. So therefore, it's not going to be a question on us, and we maintain that still Chatzos time for things that don't have any meat on it is the determining factor of when it's considered consumed or not consumed. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Itmar. So now, says the Gemara, Pirshu Kodem Chatzos. So you have things that were removed from the altar before Chatzos. V'hechziron achar Chatzos. So you remove them before Chatzos, and you put them back after Chatzos. So now what happens? Rabba Omar Chatzos Sheni Ochaltam. This case of our Mishnah, where you have these things that are pretty hard, but aren't considered coals yet, that we said Chatzos is the determining time that's considered consumed. So what happens if before chatzos it came off, and now you put it back after chatzos? So Rabbah says chatzos sheni ochalpan. So chatzos is the determining factor. So once it's on the altar the next night, so that chatzos will determine it to be consumed. Rav Chisda Amar Amud HaShachar ochalpan. Rav Chisda says that no, Amud HaShachar is ochalpan. So it came off before. So let's just for simplicity call chatzos midnight. What we know is midnight. So at 11 p.m. it got removed off the altar, and it got put back at 2 a.m. So Rabbah says only chatzos can determine it consumed. So he has to wait till the next night for it to be considered consumed, and therefore if it gets removed in the interim, you put it back on. Rav Chisda says no. Amud HaShachar ochalpan. Once the first rays of light, the early morning comes, then it's considered consumed. So by 5 a.m., by 6 a.m., it'll already be consumed. If it comes off the altar, then you don't need to put it back. So Ami Beirav, my time is Rav Chisda. What's the reason for Rav Chisda? It sounds like Rabbah makes a lot of sense. The pasuk says chatzos, chatzos it is. What's Rav Chisda saying? So he has a kal v'chomer. Uma chatzos she'ein osin lino. Uma chatzos she'ein osin lino, but yet osa equal. So we're going to see later that this idea that we know that something's called lina, it's left overnight. So there's going to be a question if it's on the altar, not on the pyre, but on the altar, and now it gets left overnight and has not been burned. Is that still considered the prohibition of leaving something overnight, and then it's invalid or not? So Rav Chisda says he's of the opinion that it does not cause the invalidation. So therefore, he has a kal v'chomer. Therefore, he has a kal v'chomer. He says, "Umachatzos, just like midnight, she'ein osim lino, cannot make something prohibited by being left overnight, but yet osa equal, but yet it still can make something considered consumed. So Amud HaShachar, the early morning, she'osa lina, ein odin, she'osa equal. If that everyone agrees, once that time hits, then it will be considered left over, and it'll be invalid for sure. It can cause something to be consumed." Yeah. Okay. So that is the rationale of Chisda as a kal v'chomer. Now, Pirshu Kodem Chatzos v'Hechzir la'achar Amud HaShachar. What if our case in our Mishnah they got removed? These parts of the sacrifices that are pretty hard got removed before midnight, but you put it back 10 a.m. after the early morning. So now you didn't have a midnight pass or a early morning pass. Is that going to consider consumed or not consumed? If it's consumed, it gets removed with the Trumas Hadeshin. And if it comes off the altar, you don't put it back on the altar. If it's not consumed, you don't put it back on the altar. So what's the halacha? Rabba Amar Chatzos Sheni Ochalta. Rabba stays consistent. You have to wait till Chatzos. So the next Chatzos is going to consider it consumed. Rav Chisda Amar Ein Ben Ikol Olam. Rav Chisda says they can never be considered consumed, ever. Why? Because his whole premise was based off the kal v'chomer. The kal v'chomer was something which makes something an invalidation, for sure makes something consumed. But only the first night, the first rays of the morning, create this invalidation. The second one does not create that invalidation. Therefore, they'll never be considered consumed. So Rashi points out that they'll never be considered consumed until they're ashes. Once they're ashes already, that's called deshin. That's already called deshin. That's already called, ashes. And then you have to remove and put with the trumas deshin. But as long as they're not ashes, so since they never had the first alos hashachar, the first rays of light, that's not going to be, they won't be considered consumed for our purposes, that if they come off the altar, you'll have to put them back on. You have to put them back on, and there will be me'ilah. So because they're not considered consumed, you're going to have to put them back on, and there will be me'ilah, which means if you misuse them, there'll be a violation. So that is Rav Chisda. So basically, we for sure, the two easy categories to remember. One is, as long as there's still meat on it, and there's what to be burnt, so then you for sure burn it. Once it's ashes, then you for sure remove it to the special ashes pile or the Truma Sedeshin. The case in the middle is what we're talking about. It's where it's hard. The liquid has been removed, but it's not yet ashes. That middle ground. That we're wondering, all these cases, when it gets removed off the altar, do you have to put it back? Is there me'ilah? Okay. Maskef Rav Yosef. Says Rav Yosef, who told you that chatzos, when it's on the altar, considers it to be consumed? Dilma kol Why does it have to be on the altar? Maybe, even if it's not on the altar and midnight passes, it'll still be considered consumed. And therefore, he's asking on our question. Our question was, it got removed from the altar before chatzos and then got put back. What happens? He said, it doesn't matter if it got removed. Maybe as long as wherever it is, midnight hits, it's now considered consumed, and therefore everyone should agree. After that point, you should not put it back on. So, what was the answer to this question? Shalchu mitam, they sent from Eretz Yisrael. Hilchos like Rav Yosef. Halacha is like Rav Yosef, that it doesn't matter where it is; it's going to be considered consumed. Meaning, if it was on the altar and then got removed from the altar, it doesn't need to be on the altar at chatzos. It could be anywhere else. And once midnight comes, that's considered to be already consumed. Yeah. And even if you put it back after chatzos, and you never had a midnight that it went through, but since midnight passed, it's already considered consumed. Therefore, there'll be no me'ilah. A support for this is if it got removed before chatzos and you put it back after chatzos, lo nanim v'lo molin. There is no me'ilah, meaning there's no biblical prohibition. It's considered to be consumed. There's a rabbinic enactment, lo nanim, that you shouldn't get any benefit from it rabbinically. But biblically, the fact that a chatzos came, even if it was not on the altar, it was pirshu, it was removed from the altar, is still enough to make it considered consumed. That's why biblically there's no me'ilah. Also, Tana Bar Kapara said, when it gets removed before chatzos and put back after chatzos, it's no more me'ilah. We've left the world of me'ilah. It says, once you have all of these opinions that are saying that if something is on the altar and then it's removed, it doesn't have to be physically on the altar to be considered consumed when midnight passes. So if that's the case, after this overwhelming amount of opinions that agree to this, so now Rabba v'Rav Chisda b'mayi pligi. What are Rabba and Rav Chisda arguing about? Amrlei b'shmeinim. They're arguing about things that have some fat on them. They're more oily. The way Rashi says it, that sounds like the even if it gets hard, even if it got hard, but their fattiness or their oil is preventing it from becoming ashes. So I guess it's like another level. That step where even though it's hard, it's still not considered consumed though because it has some oil left. It has some oil substance to it. So that's the case where they argue. If it was hard, so then it sounds like everyone agrees that once, even if it's removed off the altar, once chatzos comes, so then it's considered consumed. But if it has some oil left to prevent it from being fully consumed, fully hard, so that's where they argue. Yeah. Bo mene rabba me rabba. Here's the question. Here's the $1 million question. Lina mo'elis b'rosh hamizbeach. This idea of not leaving stuff overnight, and if you do, it has a prohibition. Does that apply when it's on the altar? Oh, eino mo'elis. Does it help? Does it help when it's on the altar? Oh, eino mo'elis. Or it doesn't help at b'rosh hamizbeach. Hechidami. So what's the case? Let's see. Ilema de lo yardu. If it was never removed from the altar, so hashtalanu. So and ilema de lo yardu. Shahashtalanu ba'azara. Amris de lo yardu b'rosh hamizbeach mibayi. So our question: does lina help if you're on the altar or not? So let's say it's a case where you did not remove it. It has not been removed from the altar. You find it there in the morning. So, but it has not been on the pyre yet. So it hasn't been burnt at all. It's just on the altar. So now, hashtalonu ba'azara amris de lo yardu rosh hamizbeach mibayi. 1 second. It sounds like, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what it's saying is that even things in the courtyard are not considered removed. So for sure, on top of the altar can't be considered removed either. So that's for sure considered not removed. The Ella de Yardu, what do you want to say? It came off, and now it came off after the morning. The Ella de Yardu. So let's say it got removed. Let's say it's not on the altar anymore, and it got removed. So l'shulchan medamin Allah. Should we compare it to like the shulchan? What's the shulchan? The Tanan, morning. The Mishnah says by the shulchan afilu hein ala shulchan yamim rabim ein bekach klum. They can stay on the shulchan for as long as they want, and there's no problem. So do you compare it to the shulchan? So let's say it was there, it came off, and but it was there, it came off after Amud Shachar. So do you say it's like the regular things, like the regular sacrifices that would be invalid with the morning, or do you compare it to the shulchan that or do you compare it to the shulchan and it's not going to be invalid? Or maybe you compare it to something which fell on the ground. So you have something which basically the nighttime passed and it was on the altar and got removed from the altar after the morning. So is that considered like a regular sacrifice that would be considered invalid, or is that more like the shulchan, where as long as it stays on there, there'll be no problem. So Amarle ein lina b'rosh hamizbeach. So he tells him back, there is no lina on the rosh hamizbeach. There is no prohibition of leaving stuff overnight as long as it was there on the altar. Prohibition was when it's not on the altar. As long as it's on the altar, there is no prohibition. So now, So the question is, so he asked him a question: is there lina? Is there a violation of leaving stuff overnight when it's on the top of the altar, or not? So the question is: did he accept his answer, or he did not accept his answer? Kibla minei olo. Did he accept the answer? He did not accept the answer. Tashma deitmar evarim shalanu be'azara Any limbs you find in the courtyard, you can sacrifice them the entire night. If they stayed overnight on the altar, then there's no violation. And you can sacrifice them for as long as you want. Yardu, if they were removed, so Rabba Amar Yalu. So Rava Amar Lo Yalu. So if they got removed from the altar after they were there overnight, so Rabba says you can put it back on, no problem. There's no violation. Rabba says Lo Yalu though. Rabba says that that no, if they got removed off the altar, that even though they were on the altar overnight, but they're still going to be considered invalid. Therefore, if they get removed, don't put it back on. So this original question was asked Rava to Rabba. Rabba told him what he thought. But then we see that Rava himself says Lo Yalu. So he did not agree. Shmamina lo kibla minei shmamina. At the end of the day, Rava did not agree to Rabba. And he holds that even though the limbs were left on the altar overnight, but still Lina ismo elis, meaning Lina does help. If it's left overnight, it does help to invalidate. Not that it doesn't help to invalidate, it does help to invalidate. Sounds like that's what Allah accords with. And therefore he did not accept Rabba's answer. So two opinions of something, usually if you leave something overnight, it's totally invalid. But here, what if it's on the altar overnight? Is that considered invalid or not? So we have let's say the bread, the special lechem upon him, that stays on there and there's no invalidation. So is our case similar to that? That was really the question. So one opinion says that no, it's not going to have the invalidation. And the other one, Rava says it is going to have the invalidation if it gets removed, and then you don't put it back on. Okay, I guess we'll start a little bit the next part. Just like the Mizbeach sanctifies, so to the ram sanctifies. Taner Rabbanan Hanugeh Mizbeach. Ain't the other Mizbeach Kevesh Minayin. It says if you touch the altar, it becomes holy. That's only the altar. The ramp, how do I know? Tamalomer Es HaMizbeach. It says Es HaMizbeach coming to include the Es HaMizbeach coming to include not only the Mizbeach, but sometimes the word Es also includes other things. In this case, it includes the ramp. Kli Shareis Minayin. How do I know that one of the vessels can also give sanctity to things put inside of it? Anything which touches them becomes holy, coming to include the vessels. Okay.